The tension between Lyra and Marius reaches a boiling point as she reveals herself to be the enigmatic hacker Morgan and confesses to orchestrating the near-fatal explosion. What drove her to such drastic measures? And how will the brothers confront this mate who is both an adversary and an irresistible partner? As the truth unfolds, Lyra's story will take you into uncharted territory. Subscribe to our channel to unravel the mystery together. 50 Marius. I'm sorry, Lyra, I whispered, my voice heavy with all the emotions I have been trying to hold back. I know my actions caused you suffering in the past. I cannot go back and undo them, but I promise you, I will take care of you till my last breath, I told her sincerely. I mean what I say. Her eyes looked slightly glossy, and her bottom lip wobbled. She looked on the verge of crying but didn't. She looked away briefly while I waited for her response. I wasn't asking for her forgiveness. I knew it'd take a long time, but I needed something from her. I felt like I was at the end of my limit, on the verge of perishing from hungering her. Okay, she muttered after a few seconds, still not looking at me. Thank you, I nodded and straightened up. I continued running my fingers through her short hair. Seeing her not fighting my touch gave me a deep sense of satisfaction. That was still a big win, and I felt like some heaviness had been lifted from my heart. My wolf was particularly happy with this. After being unable to be close to our mate for so long, touching her felt like I was standing at the gates of heaven. I kept running my fingers through her hair before tracing her jaw gently. I put a finger under her chin and made her look at me again. Her beautiful blue eyes gazed at me with uncertainty in them. The doe shape of her eyes made her so innocent and pure, making me feel even more protective of her. I was yet to find out who did the explosion. We had tried to investigate that matter but still had no clue. Our only clue was Lyra, but I didn't want to make her uncomfortable by asking her such things. She lost an arm due to that incident and almost had a near-death experience. She must have been traumatized by it. It'd be cruel to make her reminisce about it. Instead, I focused on the present with her. The silence between us was slightly charged as we peered into each other's eyes. I kept running my fingertips over her jaw, leaving gentle trails of sparks. Up this close, I could feel her wolf under her skin, ready to meet my wolf. This was the closest and most intimate I had been with her. She kept gazing at me as I continued to caress her face. Your eyes are so beautiful, Lyra, I couldn't help but tell her. She batted her eyelids a couple of times before smiling at me. My heart drummed in my chest, yearning for her. Even in sickness, she was beautiful. I couldn't take my eyes off of her no matter what. When she was unconscious at the hospital, I'd sit beside her and stare at her peaceful face for hours, memorizing everything about her. Now, as she gazed at me with her beautiful eyes, I couldn't help but gently lean in to kiss her. I paused right above her lips for a few seconds, waiting for her to tell me to back off. Instead, she took my face in her hands and gently pressed her lips to mine. I captured her lips immediately, keeping my kiss slow yet intense. I wanted to have all of her, and it was a constant inner battle to not give in to my urges and overpower her. She was still weak and I didn't want to make it too intense for her. After a light kiss, I pulled back, only for her to take me back to her lips and kiss me more fiercely this time. Her small tongue lingered on my lips as if asking me to take her, to ravage her. Ravage her I will, but not now. I was careful to be more gentle with her as I pushed my tongue past her lips, exploring her before finding her tongue and coaxing it. She moaned against my lips, her hands moving all over me, exploring me. She grabbed my collar and tried to pull me against her. I shifted closer towards her on the bed, somehow maintaining the kiss, but still it didn't feel enough for her. Hold me, she whimpered after pulling back from my slow yet passionate kiss. I didn't have to be told twice after that. I lay beside her and pulled her into my arms. She felt so small and dainty, surrounded by my muscles. She sighed contently, placing her head against my chest as if she couldn't have been in a better place. It filled me with warmth. Holding her eased almost all the stress I had been carrying for weeks now. My sweet Lyra, I whispered, gathering her in my arms and running my nose against her neck. She smelled divine. My canines begged to be sunken deep into her neck, but I held my desires back. This was all about Lyra. I needed to give her what she wanted. She made another small moan before seeking my lips again. I kissed her again and again while holding her in my arms. My knot was tight in my pants, almost on the verge of bursting after feeling our mate nearby, but I ignored it. All my focus was on Lyra's soft, eager lips as she kissed me back with the same hunger I possessed for her. For once she seemed to want me, making me feel like the happiest man on the planet. I was determined not to let anything ruin the moment, not even my own overwhelming desire for her. She was so gentle and perfect. She was all I could ever ask for. Such a perfect little angel. I felt so blessed to have her in my arms kissing me. We lay like that for a long time, either kissing or simply laying with each other in silence, hearing our hearts singing a beautiful duet and our breaths dancing to a slow rhythm. She snuggled against me, sneaking my warmth, and I gave it all to her. I was hers completely in every way. Only if she knew. 51. Lyra. I could have never imagined that I'd feel so peaceful and protected while laying against Marius. I had always thought he was a cold-hearted, ruthless brute who only cared about ruining other people to advance his interests. Well, to some extent he was that kind of man, but I never knew he had soft she to himself. He let me snuggle against him after all the kisses. I still wanted to continue kissing him, but I didn't. I was looking for something hot, fiery, and passionate, but all he gave me were those gentle kisses. Not that they weren't great. I loved them, but I needed more. And at that moment it felt like he was holding himself back. I could tell he was gentle with me because of my condition, which made me want him more. "Do you want to sleep?" he asked when I yawned. His voice was low and husky, giving me all the butterflies. "Are you going to stay?" I asked. I didn't want him to leave yet. I wanted him beside me. His presence had such a calming effect, and my wolf liked it. After staying away from one of her mates, having him by my side made her happier. She was awake, purring and working at healing me. She hadn't been so enthusiastic in a long time. If only Caspian were here too, she'd have been over the moon to have both of her mates. But being with Marius alone was fine too. In fact, I relished this alone time with him. I couldn't keep running from him anymore. I needed to accept him and get used to him, and this was the beginning of that. "I will if you want me to," he offered. His eyes set on my face fervently, waiting for a response. "Then stay," I whispered, feeling shy for asking that. He smiled and nodded at me before pulling the covers over us. I settled back in his arms immediately, letting him spoon me. I felt so content in his arms. I felt the same in Caspian's arms, but in a different way. Caspian had a playfulness to himself that made me feel like a kid, but in a good way. Marius's presence had a domineering aura that made me feel like I was well taken care of. It had a calming effect, but, at the same time, a certain kind of tension. I could feel all the tension in his body as he pressed against me. His muscles felt right, but most important of all, the massive bulge in his pants was hard to ignore as it poked at my ass. I felt Marius adjusting his position to ensure that his hardness didn't poke me, but I didn't care. I snuggled deep against him until I could feel the whole length of his cock pressed against my thigh. If anything, this seemed to have made his body more tense. I bit back my smile and pretended to be oblivious to the effect I was having on him. He blew a deep breath against my ear. Our position bothered him, but he hadn't said anything about it yet. "Sleep," he whispered, pressing his hand over my chest where my heart was beating. I sighed, snuggling closer to him until I felt him grow more tense. But the teasing game could always be a double-edged sword. Could always backfire, and it was happening to me. I felt more intrigued while feeling his cock pressed against my hip. I could tell his knot was bigger than Caspian's, making my walls clench in excitement. I wiggled again, feeling the size of his knot. This time, he let out a tortured groan as he adjusted himself again so as not to poke me with his erection. But I had other plans. "You're moving too much," I complained, facing him before pressing my front against his, tangling our legs. "I don't like that." "Sorry," he muttered, stilling like a statue as I pretended to sleep against him. I bit back another smile, slowly moving my hand down his pants. "Lyra," he growled in warning when my fingers gently brushed against his bulge. I almost jumped out of my skin because his growl was loud, making the whole bed shake momentarily. "What?" I asked innocently, searching his face to see if I had crossed any boundaries. So far, his face had a tortured look while his eyes were dark with desire. "You know what you're doing," he growled, holding my hand and keeping it from roaming around his bulge. I bit my lower lip to fight the blush from staining my face. I had been caught red-handed, and there was no denying after this. Can I see you? I asked, deciding to come clear. His eyes darkened and a feral look took over his face. I could feel his whole body tense like a high-voltage electric wire. No, he answered, his voice deeper and guttural. Despite his answer, he was looking at me as if he wanted to devour me. And I wanted to be devoured so bad. He was holding himself back. But I didn't want him to. Okay, I pouted, settling back and giving him an innocent look. That did nothing to dissipate the tension in his body. If anything, he felt more tense against me. I could swear his muscles felt like a rock. The silence that followed next was deafening. I could tell he was thinking about it. Well, it served him well for turning down my generous offer. After a few minutes, he put a finger under my chin and made me look at him. I didn't want to scare or upset you, Lyra, he told me sincerely, his gaze burning hot on my face. I could practically hear him thinking about my request again and again. I could feel his wolf yearning for my touch. Do you want to see me? He asked with a bit of hesitancy. I want to see you're not, I told him, running my hand over his chest and slowly edging it towards his pants. Please, I breathed, and that was enough to break him. 52, Marius. I felt like an idiot after turning down her request to see me, especially when she fell quiet, and her body tensed. Even though she was beside me, I could feel her thoughts going away from me, and I didn't like that. I wanted her here with me while I held her and soothed her. This soothing was as much for me as it was for her. After not being able to talk to her properly for weeks, I finally had the opportunity to kiss her and spend some time with her. The moon goddess must have been pleased with me today because Lyra was not only opening up to me, but she accepted me. At least physically, and that felt like the floodgates of pleasures had been opened for me, only for me to shut them close. I mentally groaned. I shouldn't have said no, but I did because she was still recovering, and I didn't want things to grow too intense between us quickly. I was afraid I couldn't hold myself back if my self-control snapped. Still, her silence was bothering, so I put a finger under her chin and made her look at me. Her beautiful blue eyes regarded me with a hunger that matched my own. I didn't want to scare or upset you, Lyra. Do you want to see me? I asked her, hoping I hadn't ruined my chance by being so uptight. Caspian was right about me. I needed to let loose occasionally and take random opportunities to make the best of them. Well, I was learning about it now. I want to see you're not, she whispered, running her hand over my chest and slowly edging towards my pants. My cock was hard as a rod, and my knot was full with my seed ready to explode. Just the feeling of her hand anywhere near my knot made me spill slightly. I wasn't sure how long I could hold myself off. This got me contemplating if I was doing the right thing until she batted her eyelashes at me innocently and whimpered, "Please." That one word was like a blow to my self-control, and I nodded at her weakly, unsure myself, but the way it lit her eyes with excitement made me feel like it'd be worth it. She rose from my side and pecked my lips before her hands lingered over my pants. With a mischievous look on her face, she undid my pants and reached inside. It felt like I was going to burst when her warm fingers wrapped around my throbbing knot, and she pulled it out to see. A gasp left her lips upon seeing the dark color of my knot. I groaned because I was so starved for her that her mere fingers on my knot felt pleasurable enough already. Lyra, I whispered her name, reaching out to touch her while she stared at my throbbing knot. It had almost turned purple, and the veins around it were almost black. Marius, she whispered, your knot is so big and tight, she commented, wrapping her fingers around it or attempting to because my knot was so full of seed. I hadn't drained it since last night, resulting in such a condition. I watched the fascinated and slightly worried look on her face as she stroked my knot gently. I couldn't hold back the low moan that escaped my lips. Why's your knot so dark, Marius? Are you all right? She asked me, sounding more worried. The fact that she cared for me so much immediately pleased me. I'm all right, I assured her, caressing her face. Her eyes softened as she stared at me. I hadn't drained my knot since last night and I trailed off, unable to complete my sentence after seeing the look of understanding on her face. A look of pure guilt crossed her face. I'm all right, Lyra, I assured her before she could assume something wrong. I shouldn't have pushed you away, she breathed, stroking my knot more passionately. I should have thought about your knot. It must have been so painful for you to be ignored by your mate. It's all right, Lyra, I assured her again. The truth was that I was about to burst, and the way she stroked me wasn't helping my situation at all. I heard my heart putting in my chest and my whole body burning for a release. My balls felt as tight as my knot, wanting to spill the seed they had been trying to hold back for so fucking long. No, it's not. She pouted, stroking me until a few beads of pre-cum leaked from my cock and ran down the whole length, making my breath hitch. Lyra gasped and continued stroking me harder and faster to ease my knot. Fuck, you're so full and heavy. It's all because of me neglecting you, she muttered as she continued to stroke me. Marius, she whispered, dipping her head and placing a teasing kiss on the tip of my cock, making me leak more. I let out a tortured groan, my fingers digging into her hips desperately, but she didn't seem to care. All her attention was on my knot and my cock. I'm going to drain your knot like a good mate, and then I'll lap up all your seed, she promised, earning another tortured groan from me. I could smell her arousal slowly filling in the air as well. Lyra, I growled, and she gave me the hungriest look before putting her mouth on the tip of my cock. What followed next was the most mind-numbing and intense orgasm that ripped through my body. My knot spilt all the seed it had been storing for many hours, filling her mouth. I was afraid she was going to choke my cum, but she lapped up every drop of my happily. Her mouth remained on my cock while her humane hand worked my knot, and the other hand gently massaged my balls. I couldn't have asked for more. The annoying pressure I had felt in my knot for the past couple of weeks was finally gone. However, this time the effect of the release was long-lasting because of Lyra's touch, and it filled me with even more hunger for her. You taste so good, Marius, she purred, running her tongue over my knot and making my balls clench. Let me taste you now, I demanded. I had to taste her now or else I would lose my mind. She smiled at me but gave me a teasing lick in response. So I went along with it. I lifted her hips and placed them on my chest, and tore her pants away until her pussy was visible to me. She gasped in surprise but didn't protest when I touched her slit, feeling my knot starting to grow tight again with the new flow of seed. I groaned and buried my face into her cunt, making her moan against my cock. She played with my cock, and I devoured her cunt. I couldn't have asked for anything better than this. 53. Caspi and I stared at the screen, reviewing the recent progress reports on the offshore accounts. We had finally managed to salvage some big ones, and the other ones were in the process of being salvaged. It was one of the best ways to take my mind off Lyra. Even though I was concerned about her health, I was somewhat relieved at the moment that Marius was beside her, looking after her. After the incident last night, I had wanted to stay at her side, but sensing Marius's distress, I decided to leave him alone with her. He needed her more at the moment. And I needed some time to think, calm down my racing thoughts, and get a hold over all my emotions before facing her again. Until then, I focused on work, and well, after weeks of inactivity there were some interesting updates. Not the kind that pleased me, though. All the damage Morgan had done a couple of months ago was finally being dealt with. However, Morgan struck again when I thought we were on top of things. This time, however, she had crossed the line by selling intel to the Drakons of the Arctic. They were our sworn enemies but equally powerful. There had been enough wars in the past between us, and finally, after enough bloodshed, a treaty was signed that ensured that we never crossed paths again in any way. However, by selling our intel to them, Morgan was trying to stir some shit between us. This would finally be the last straw that broke the camel's back. Due to Lyra's weak health, we couldn't focus on our investigation. Also, it wasn't like we had many clues on Morgan yet. The only person who could tell us about Morgan was Lyra, but I didn't want to stress her out by talking about such things. Marius also felt the same, and it was the only thing holding us back. Whatever the fuck was happening out there, Lyra's health and well-being were the number one thing for us, and we weren't going to compromise with that. But with Morgan's recent shenanigans, I was afraid we needed to have a serious conversation with Lyra soon. I sighed deeply as I looked through all the reports one of our moles sent in the Drakon territory. After going through them, it seemed like Morgan was trying to ally with them. This meant big trouble. From the kind of intel that she sold them, it was clear that she was trying to incite them against us. Morgan was playing a dangerous game, the kind of game that could put the whole continent in danger. I wondered if this move was the reaction to our brief expedition in the south to find her out. That must have left her in a sour mood. However, all this proved one of my previous hypotheses wrong, Lyra being Morgan. Lyra wasn't Morgan after all. But I still believed Lyra knew something important about Morgan, and she had been in contact with her. Maybe it was Morgan who put Lyra in danger. The explosion was still a big mystery, and we had yet to get any proper clue about it. Again, we knew Lyra could tell us a lot more, but we hesitated to talk to her. I didn't know how she'd react to that. I wanted her to rest and not worry about a thing. I knew she was still adjusting to the idea of having a cybernetic arm. In such a situation, the last thing I wanted was to talk to her about the explosion. But the situation was tense, and we needed some clue soon or there'd be wars. When I went home, Marius was in the office while Lyra was sleeping peacefully in her room, her vitals seemingly normal. Marius seemed to be in a better mood until I told him about the recent developments. It enraged him because the last thing we wanted was to deal with the Drakons. We should talk to her, I urged. I know she's weak and needs some more time to accept her new arm, but Morgan is planning something that could break the treaty. She's pushing our limits, I told him. He nodded, but there was still reluctance in his eyes. Did you two talk? I asked after a couple of moments. I had left the two alone, hoping that Lyra would also start to bond with him. In the past couple of weeks, she had avoided him at all costs, and it hurt me to see my brother in such a state. We spent some time together, he nodded, his eyes slightly dark. I knew what he meant by that and offered him a smile. She didn't forgive me yet, but we're talking finally, he clarified before I could comment. I nodded, satisfied with the progress the two had made. It loosened a few knots in my chest. I'm glad to hear that, I said, but I think it's about time we talk to her about Morgan. In response, Marius rubbed his chin deep in his thoughts. I could tell that he was weighing the options. There were no fucking options. We needed to stop Morgan from dragging the Drakons into this. Give her a few more days, he told me. Let her be stable properly and then we'll talk about it. I grunted, feeling restless, but at the same time, I couldn't deny that he was right. After seeing Lyra's condition last night, I thought giving her a few more days to gather her strength would be best. Despite that, the situation was still tense due to the failed talk at dinner. It kept lingering in my head until I couldn't ignore it anymore. Did you pay them a visit? Matt asked, reading my emotions. No, I sighed deeply, thinking about our mother. Go see her if it's bothering you too much, he urged. I don't want you slipping into darkness again. I'll think about it, I grumbled and went into my room for some time alone. 54. Lyra. I woke up the next day feeling much better than ever since waking up after the explosion. I even had more energy than usual, and my wolf was active, feeling energetic and hard at work to heal me. Maybe it was all because she finally got to spend time with Marius and his wolf. My face looked less bony, and my breasts were finally returning, making me feel slightly better. The scars on my head were covered, and even though the cybernetic arm made me feel disoriented somewhat occasionally, I was slowly getting used to it. It was finally starting to feel like my real arm. My legs and human arm felt less bony, which was a good sign. On this particular morning, I took slightly longer under the shower, exfoliating my skin and shaving my legs and arm. I washed my newly grown hair, feeling its new texture. It was coolier than my previous harvest and I liked it. When I exited the bathroom, Caspian awaited me with the breakfast. My heart stuttered as soon as I saw him. I hadn't had the opportunity to be with him ever since my confrontation with Marius. His eyes lit up as soon as he saw me, and he offered a gentle smile as I stepped closer to the bed. You look beautiful, he told me, drinking in my appearance. I climbed on the bed, flinging myself at him until I was in his lap, and my arms were around his neck, burying my face in the crook of his neck. I missed him so fucking much. My wolf purred with happiness to be back with him. However, I thought of the dinner and how I had screamed at the two. I was still guilty about it all but was hesitant to talk about it. Are you feeling better? He asked, his voice a caressing whisper against my ear as he gently ran his hands over my back. I held him tightly, filling my lungs with his intoxicating scent that never failed to stir my hunger. I'm feeling better now, I sighed against his skin, not wanting to let him go yet. Did you miss me, my pussy cat? He asked, his voice darkening with my pet name. I swallowed hard. Of course I had missed him. Even if the situation was tense between us, my yearning for them persisted. I couldn't ever stop missing them. I missed them every fucking second. A part of me wished to have Marius in my room to shower me with all the attention. I'd be over the moon. Yes, I replied, brushing my lips against his neck and feeling him grow tense under me. His hand stopped at my hips and pulled me closer until I could feel his hardness poking my inner thigh. His knot was hard and filled with seed for me. I missed you too, my pussycat, he whispered in my ear. Do you want to see how much I missed you? Yes, I replied without missing a beat. I needed him, I craved him. The brothers were my soul's sustenance. Without them, I felt empty, especially between my legs. I'll let you see me once you eat all the breakfast like a good girl. He purred against my ear, caressing my back while I felt his erection poking me angrily. I groaned but agreed to it. He silently fed me, not allowing me to eat on my own. I grumpily let him fuss over me while enjoying the warmth and comfort of his lap. I loved it when he pampered me. My previous lovers had never shown this level of care for me, and this made me feel even more guiltier for treating the brothers like shit. I'm sorry, I whispered, feeling like a coward after he was done feeding me. I couldn't stop thinking about my meltdown at the dinner, and needed to get it off my chest. It's okay. We don't have to talk about it, he assured, and a knot in my chest loosened. I put my hands under his shirt, feeling his six-packs and his delicious muscles while he kissed me gently. My pussy cat. His hot, needy tongue traced my lips before petting my tongue in slow, sensual motion, making me burn for him. I was breathless when I pulled back, clinging to him like he was all I had. My pussy cat deserves all the best things in the world after suffering so much, he muttered, setting small kisses all over my jaw and neck, making my breath hitch. I'll do anything for my pussy cat. If words could melt, I'd be a puddle already. Why didn't you come to see me yesterday? I pouted, running my hands all over him and feeling all his muscles. I wanted to run my tongue over them and see how he reacted. I wanted to taste him and hear his beautiful moans. They were like music to my ears. I was busy, he answered, pressing slow kisses while he teased my tight nipples. Just some mess. Was it more important than me? I asked playfully and he chuckled. No, but since Marius was with you, I decided to give you two some alone time, he answered. Were you kind to him, pussy cat? He asked with his dark, rumbly voice loaded with sinful promises. Did you let him taste you? You know he yearns for as much as I do. I bit my bottom lip at his words, somehow finding it hot talking about my time with his brother. I told him in a sultry whisper. I played with his knot while he played with my pussy. Such a good girl, he praised. His words were like gasoline to my desire. My pussy clenched as he continued. You're meant to be shared, remember that. Your pussy is his as much as it's mine. You've got two knots to take care of, pussy cat. Would you be able to do that? Yes, I whimpered, breathing hard while my core pulsed with need. All his dirty talk was making my pussy clench for a knot. Are you sure, pussy cat? He asked darkly. These are two alpha knots, and you're going to be busy draining them once you recover. My mouth dried up, thirsty for his seed already. Yes, I want that, I moaned. Please, good, he purred, but not now, pussy cat. I want you to heal quickly before we give you our knots. We don't want to break you. Until then, you have to let us play with your pussy, let your cunt get used to us and realize whom it belongs to. Do you understand? He asked darkly. Yes, I moaned as he slowly slipped his hand into my pants. Good girl, he whispered in my ear as he found my clit. I was already ready to come undone. 55. Caspian, I caressed Lyra's arm, losing the feel of her body against mine. Even though I had been away from her for a few days, it felt like years. My wolf and I were so content to finally have her in my arms while she snuggled against me cutely. As I lay with her, I couldn't help but think about the threat that was lingering over us. Whatever Morgan was up to had kept me awake all night. If she pushed stuff to this extent, a war was inevitable. A war was the last thing I wanted to happen. I remembered the tales of our last war with the Drakons. My great-grandfather had fought in it, and we still had to endure the damage caused by the previous war. The treaty that was in place required us to pay war reparations to the Drakons while they stayed out of our business and stayed limited to their Arctic circle. All hell would break loose if the treaty were violated from either side. What are you thinking? Lyra asked. Her voice was a low whisper as she. I sighed deeply. Marius had told me not to talk to her about the issue for almost another week, but after mulling over it all night, I felt that waiting another week could cost us more. How do you feel about your arm, Lyra? I asked her gently, caressing her cheek. It's alright, but sometimes it makes me uncomfortable, she told me. I'm not sure if it will work once I turn into my wolf. We can try if you want, I encouraged her. It'd be better if you let your wolf out once and go for a run with us. She'd heal you faster, I told her, and she nodded, lost in her thoughts. Lyra, I started feeling hesitant to talk about it, but at the same time, I knew that if I didn't speak to her about it soon enough, we might get in big trouble. Do you remember anything about the explosion? I drew out the question slowly and cautiously. Immediately, her body tensed against mine. I cupped her face and kissed her jaw gently to calm her down. It's okay if you don't want to talk about it, I assured her, but it'd help us with the investigation. We want to know who did this to you, Lyra. She remained silent for a while as I stroked her arm. Are you all right? I asked her after a few seconds when she wouldn't speak or her body wouldn't loosen up. Instead, she remained tense. The explosion. She sighed. It was an accident. Her words puzzled me. To us, the explosion looked like anything but an accident. What do you mean? How did it happen? What were you doing there? All these questions flowed from my lips before I could hold myself back. My curiosity had gotten the best of me, especially since we had spent such a long time wondering about this without a single hint. Lyra looked me into the eyes. Her blue eyes gleamed. There was so much depth in them that I felt lost for a second. I'm sorry, I breathed, feeling the overwhelm in her. I shouldn't be pushing her so hard, but at the same time I wanted her to know what was up. I didn't want to trigger you. Do you know why we went to Lake Town? When she didn't answer, I continued. For some time now we've been trying to hunt this hacker. Her name is Morgan. She has given us trouble for a long time, and finally we could track her to her base, but we didn't find her. We need to find her soon because she's up to no good. She has finally crossed the line by selling intel to the Drakons. She was quiet all along, but, hearing the last bit, glanced at her face. What? She asked, sitting up and looking shocked. Morgan is trying to stir some shit up with the Drakons, I told her, observing her reaction. She didn't look traumatized or overwhelmed like she did when I tried to talk to her about the explosion. How is that possible? She asked. I narrowed my eyes at her. She looked tense, her eyes unfocused as 1,000 thoughts cluttered her head. Do you know anything about Morgan? I asked her. If anything, her body looked more tense. From the mate bond, I could feel a storm of emotions raging inside her. This confirmed my speculation. She had something to do with Morgan. Tell me everything that has happened since the explosion, she demanded. Look, I don't want to overwhelm you. I need to know, Caspian, she growled, fury flashing in her eyes. I had never seen her like this. Even though she was sick and weak, the rage in her eyes was enough to destroy the strongest of packs. I stared at her reaction. How much do you know about Morgan? I asked her. She cocked an eyebrow at me. I know her, she answered quietly, her body tense. I sat up. I had been correct all along. She was somehow related to Morgan if she weren't Morgan herself. How? I asked. I cannot explain that now. First, tell me what has happened since the explosion. Fuck, I should have paid more attention, she hissed, fisting her hair and looking around the room restlessly. I pulled her in my arms to calm her down. It's okay, Lyra. Calm down. It's not as bad, I assured her. But she pulled back with a determined look. The last thing Morgan did was freeze some of our offshore accounts. We have managed to get some of them back. Just a couple of days ago, one of our moles informed us that Morgan has traded intel with the Drakons, and she's in constant touch with them. Her face paled even more as soon as I explained her the whole situation. Immediately, I regretted talking to her about this. I should have waited for a few more days. If she fell sick again, Marius would kill me. Lyra, what kind of intel did she sell them? Tell me more, she demanded. By this time, I was regretting talking about it at all. Lyra, calm down, tell me, she growled, and it was powerful enough to shake the bed. I bristled, staring at her in shock. At that moment, she didn't look sick or weak at all. She looked ready to bite someone's head off. Marius is looking at it before I could finish talking. She hopped off the bed and stormed out of her bedroom. I followed her as she stormed to our office and almost tore the door off with astonishing strength. 56. Marius. I was working in the office when I heard some commotion outside, 2 pairs of footsteps storming towards the office. Before I could investigate the issue, the office door was almost ripped open with an alarming strength by none other than my mate. Her face was feral, and it was the first time I had seen her like that. For once it sent a shiver down my spine. She looked ready to kill. Behind her came panicked Caspian, who was asking her to stop. Tell me everything. Lyra growled her demand. Her eyes darkened, and her voice deepened as her wolf took over her. I was baffled at the sudden change in her demeanor. I could have never imagined that Lyra had in her to act such a way. I wondered what made her act like this. However, Caspian's guilty eyes gave me some hints before I could ask. Tell you about what? I asked, standing up from my place slowly. Behind her, Caspian was pacing, something he often did after creating trouble for me. Tell me what Morgan has done. I need to know, she demanded, her voice deep and nothing like hers. It made my wolf stir, wanting to get close to her and calm her wolf down. At that moment, Lyra didn't look one bit sick or weak. I almost caught a glimpse of her old self in her, which made a part of me happy, but at the same time, her extreme reactions were unexpected and harrowing. I looked at Caspian with accusing eyes. I knew he had to have a hand in this. He talked to her about the issue even though I had told him not to. He went looking for trouble. He fired her up like this when all she should have been doing was rest. Lyra, I drew out softly, stepping closer to her. You need to calm down, or else you'll burn through all your energy and pass out. Just tell me already. She screamed, and the walls of my office shivered. Caspian grew tenser, stepping behind her to talk, but if anything, her eyes were dark with fury. Lyra, I growled lowly to set her straight. What kind of intel that imposter sold to the Drakons? She asked, shaking with fury. Tell me. My eyes widened and I glared at Caspian. Yup. He had told her everything, and I was going to bite his head off when I got him alone soon. You don't need to get into this, Lyra. We have the situation under control, I tried to assure her, but she laughed at my face like I was a clown. You have no idea what you're talking about, she mocked me, walking past me to get to the screens, but before she could touch them, I slipped between her and the screens. Yes, I know what I'm talking about, Lyra. Now sit the fuck down or else you be plugged into those machines again. I growled, and this finally seemed to have snapped her in place. But she glared at me and stepped away, crossing her arms over her chest and shooting me a murderous glare. Oh really? Then tell me about the intel. I need to know, she insisted, a fierce look in her eyes. Her jaw was so tight it could shatter at any moment. I haven't gotten the news yet, but it's mostly regarding what Morgan had been collecting against us, I told her calmly, but my blood was getting hotter. If anything, she laughed even more. The mocking tone pricked me very close to my pride. You don't know what kind of intel that imposter sold them? She probed. Imposter? I asked. What do you mean? Is that not Morgan? I asked. She said she knows Morgan, Caspian added, only to receive a perilous look from me. I returned to Lyra, and she was grinding her teeth hard, something dark flickering in her arctic blue eyes. You know Morgan? I asked her. The one who sold the intel is definitely not Morgan, she answered cryptically. And neither is anyone else who claims to be that bitch, are you sure? I asked her, narrowing my eyes. In return, she threw her head back and laughed a dangerous, villainous laugh that could make anyone's blood run cold. I'm surprised at you two brothers. Morgan had targeted you two for the longest time, yet you are clueless about how she works. I gave you more credits, she spoke, plopping on one of the grand seats and crossing her legs regally. Her movements were lithe and elegant, as if she wasn't wearing a cybernetic arm and that explosion hadn't happened. As if she was whole, powerful and invincible. Do you know Morgan or not? I asked her again, feeling restlessness rise inside me. I had a lot of questions that needed to be answered, and even though I didn't want to push Lyra, a part of me wanted to know. I was dying to find out. I know Morgan would never do anything like that, she shot sharply. That's not how Morgan works. Then tell us who's messing with us. I asked. If it's not Morgan, who could it be? Who could dare to collect intel on us and sell it to the Drakons? A deathly silence drenched the whole office. Lyra leaned back in the chair, acting like she was some royalty and we were mere mortals in her court with the purpose of only serving her. Part of me liked that. Morgan collected intel on you too. Someone stole it from her and sold it to the Drakons, she stated after a thoughtful silence. I cocked an eyebrow at her. And Morgan let that happen. I thought she was the best hacker out there, undefeated and unmatched in her skill. Yet someone managed to steal from her. I jabbed. Lyra seemed to hold Morgan in some high regard. But if what she claimed was true, then Morgan had lost already. Where is Morgan? Who is she? Why hasn't she done anything about the imposter yet? She couldn't do anything because she went missing. Lyra growled. And how do you know that? I pressed, my restlessness bubbling like hot lava about to erupt from a volcano. Morgan blew up her house and lost an arm while trying to run from you brothers. Because Morgan is me. I'm Morgan. She finally snapped. 57. Caspian. Morgan blew up her house and lost an arm while trying to run from you brothers. Because Morgan is me. I'm Morgan. Lyra roared. Her words tectonically shocked me. I was baffled more by the fact that I had always been right with my guesses. That Lyra was, in fact, Morgan. It had been a wild guess on my part, and it made it more astonishing for it to be true. A thick carpet of silence stretched in the room, and a buzzing tensing sparked in the air. Lyra was Morgan. I couldn't believe that we had been looking after none other than Morgan herself all this time. That I had been taking care of Morgan, kissing her, holding her, feeding her and eating her pussy whenever she begged me for it. Morgan was our mate. Lyra had been the one tormenting us for so many years by creating trouble for us. Her strongest motive had been her father's death all along. All this revelation felt like one of the gods had let us know some of the universe's deepest secrets. Morgan Marius breathed, his body tensed. He never believed in my claims, even though they were based on guesses rather than evidence. He looked more shocked. You are. He trailed off speechless. In response, Lyra smiled evilly. My sweet evil mate. Our mate. It had been her all along. She had been stringing us all this time. She had been playing with us, fucking up our systems, hacking into our systems and doing all sorts of things. She was the best at what she did. And there was no doubt in that, but to know that it had been our mate all along. A mate that we had wished for so long. But, you made the explosion happen? I asked. A dark look dawned upon her face. And that was an answer in itself. All this time we had been looking for the culprit, someone to blame, to punish, to take out all our anguish stored from the time when Lyra was in a coma and having all those serious medical procedures done. It was torture seeing her broken, cut open and scarred body, not knowing if she'd ever wake up or not. She had been the one behind it all this time. Why? Marius growled. Why did you put yourself in such danger, Lyra? He demanded. His voice laced with fury and another intense emotion. Did I disappoint you so much that you had to take such an extreme step? I realized that other emotion was self-hatred. Of course he was blaming himself for this. Immediately Lyra's face softened. The explosion wasn't to hurt anyone, she replied firmly. I wanted to burn my house down because I knew Caspian had somehow tracked my phone number. But you two came down at the most inconvenient moment, and the explosion didn't happen when it was supposed to happen. I panicked, went to look at it and got caught in the fire, she explained. And you ended up losing an arm. You could have gotten yourself killed. We could have lost you. It was now Marius's turn to roar in anger. Marius, I snapped before he could take it farther. Lyra blinked her eyes fast, fighting her tears. I slipped beside her and pulled her in my arms. She buried her face in my chest immediately and sniffed. I'm sorry, Marius grumbled, but he was still rage-filled. I shouldn't have let you go that night. I should have kept you with me. It'd have saved us a lot of trouble. I should have listened to my wolf because he never wanted you to go. I let you go because I didn't want to keep you with me against your wishes, Marius growled, rubbing his face in frustration, but that look of self-loathing remained. I knew he was shouldering the blame even though there was no fucking way anyone could have predicted this. I got blinded by vengeance, Lyra sniffed against my chest. All I had asked for was a mate, and when I saw you I lost it. All I saw was that I got my father's murderer as my mate. She quivered in my arms as she broke down into tears. It's okay, Lyra, I tried to calm her. Everyone makes mistakes in life, and you didn't know the full truth. If anything, my words made her cry harder. Marius sent me another of his murderous glares because, of course, I had been the one to start this shit show by telling her about all this crap in the first place. But now things were out in the open. We knew what was up, and that eased me because for the past few weeks it felt like we were in limbo, having no fucking clue about what we were supposed to do and where we were supposed to look. But now we had the answers. Not all of them yet, but some of the important ones. I fucked up, she sniffed. I fucked it all up, and the arm was a lesson. Lyra, I whispered, looking back at her red face and tear-stained cheeks. She didn't want to look me in the eyes as I kissed her gently to lull her. It's not your fault. Don't blame yourself, I told her. I'm sorry about your arm, but you have a better new one. You can now easily break anyone's nose. I suggested humorously. Yeah, and you should start with Caspian first, Marius suggested, and Lyra almost choked on her spit. I rolled my eyes at Marius. He was pissed at me, and before Lyra could, he was the one who'd give me a broken nose. I'll start with whoever gets on my nerves first, Lyra sniffed. But now we have to go. I bristled and exchanged a look with Marius. Go where? Marius and I asked at the same time. She pulled back from my embrace and went to the screens again. However, before touching them, she glanced at Marius. I store my private servers in a location no one knows about, she explained. We need to get there before the imposter can locate them. They've managed to hack into it. It's only a matter of time before they find out its location. What exactly is in those servers except for all the dirt you've gathered on us for all these years? Marius asked. Even though Lyra still had tears streaming down her face, she laughed. I have shit on all the packs, including the ones on the other end of the continent. I know the shit they're up to, and it's nothing the treaty allows. If the Drakons got to know about it, they wouldn't waste a second to descend from the Arctic Circle, she replied, wiping her tears and looking like she meant business. Now, can I please access the computers? I need to locate the servers for you to find, she requested, batting her eyelids at Marius, who was still feral with age. We need to go to them today. I'll let you touch my computer, and in return you'll spill all your guts, Lyra, Marius demanded. Lyra pouted. I pointed her a look that let her know I was on my brother's side. Fine, she hissed annoyingly. 58, Lyra. It was all out in the open now, and there was no going back. The brothers knew I was Morgan, and I had been messing with them all along. Initially, I planned to hide it for several weeks, but the imposter situation changed everything. I couldn't hide anymore. I had to do something about it before the Drakons could head south and start a war against us. Whoever got them involved was the biggest idiot of the century. Or they could be planning to take over the whole continent. I shuddered. My imposter was up to something sinister, something that scared even me. If anything, it made me want to find them out as soon as possible and stop them. I couldn't let them misuse my name. However, someone misusing my name was the least of my concerns. After the revelation, I had yet to gauge what the brothers thought of me. So far, they hadn't shown much reaction except for being shocked and surprised. However, I was expecting more. Indeed, they wouldn't let it slide after all the trouble I had created for them in the past. I'd have to pay for my shenanigans one way or the other, and deep down I knew how it would go down. I was their mate after all. I'm going, I declared after giving out the location of my servers. A long time ago, I had bought an abandoned mansion on the eastern ranges of Vestbroke. At first, I had planned to make that place my home, but then I decided to move south because the winters in Vestbroke were cruel. It didn't snow there in the winter. No, it was worse. It rained there all winter. I hated rain equally as snow. In comparison, Lake Town was the best. It had mild weather and not much variation throughout the year. And the sea was another plus point. I loved hearing it at night while I fell asleep. All that was gone now, I reminded myself. No, you won't. Marius was the first to object. You've already worked yourself enough today. It's a long journey from here. I second that. Caspian chipped in, and I glared at him. I could sense the tension between the two brothers over something. I could tell that Caspian was taking Marius's side in an attempt to ease the tension. I narrowed my eyes at him. You cannot go with us. Do you expect me to stay here alone and overthink myself to death? I asked, restless. I needed to go to do something or else I would lose my mind. I had already wasted so much time doing nothing. I couldn't afford to waste more time. You are sick, Lyra, Marius reminded me, his voice sharp and commanding. I glared at him. I need to go. I'll be more sick waiting here, I told him fiercely, not willing to back down at any cost. I'm going to prepare for the journey, Caspian said. You can talk to her. I knew this was his ploy to avoid Marius's rage. I glared at him again as he slinked away from the room, giving me an apologetic smile. Lyra, you cannot go with us. It'll take us a couple of days back and forth on the road, and your health is still uncertain, Marius reasoned. He was right on all accounts, but I wouldn't listen. I had to go. You wouldn't be able to get to my servers without me, I pointed, crossing my arms over my chest and leveling him with a determined look. A look of frustration crossed his eyes, and his jaw hardened. You undermine what we can do, Lyra, he commented quietly. I laughed. The explosion was the only reason you got to me, I shot back, and all of a sudden, he was in front of me. He had covered the several meters of distance between us in the blink of an eye. I gasped and tried to step back, but I was already up against a wall, trapped by him. I'm starting to think you still enjoy playing the cat and mouse game, he growled lowly, his face inches away from mine. My heart was ramming in my chest, and my wolf stirred, wanting to end the rest of the distance between us. I put my hands on his chest, and instead of pushing my away, I pulled him closer and whispered, "What if I do?" A feral look dawned upon his face, his eyes darkening with a hellish desire. His chest vibrated with a thunderous growl, and in the next moment, his lips were mushed against mine, claiming me with a furious need. I whimpered at his intensity. It was overwhelming but extremely arousing at the same time. He ran his tongue over my lips as if he owned them and then speared past them to stake a claim to my mouth. No, he didn't need to stake a claim on me anymore. That had been done long ago. This mere act was just a reminder of sorts that every part of me belonged to him. His tongue caressed mine with a burning devotion while his muscular arms went around me to sweep me off my feet. The next moment, I was seated on his office table with him standing between my legs. I gasped for a breath desperately when he freed my lips. "It's a dangerous game, Lyra," he whispered, rubbing the tip of his nose down my neck with such intensity that I was burning for him. My pussy came alive with a pulse, wanting him and his knot. The way it clenched made me want to whimper, to beg, to plead with him to fill me and end my misery. But that'd be accepting defeat, and for now my pride was too great for that. "One that leads to nothing but trouble," he added darkly, lingering on the most sensitive part of my neck. "I love trouble," I purred, clutching the front of his shirt and trying to pull him closer. I could see his huge bulge, his knot begging to be let free. The sight made my pussy clench even more. Marius growled at my words. I continued, "I live for trouble. Trouble is my middle name. You need to get used to it, Lyra," he growled as I wrapped my legs around his torso and rubbed against the hardness in his pants. "Do you think I could stay away from this for even a few days?" I hissed, running my hands all over his muscles, feeling every bit of them. "Do you think you could sleep at night without touching me?" The tortured look on his face told me that I had gotten a hold of him, that I was making him don't my own decision. I chuckled darkly. "I must go with you too." Suddenly, he pressed me down until my back was on the table, and he was hovering over me. The feral look on his face was more dangerous than ever. It looked like he wanted to devour me, and well, I wanted to be devoured by both of them, at the same fucking time. This short trip would be the perfect opportunity for that because in this house, there seemed to be an unspoken rule between the brothers that two of them couldn't be with me at the same time. I hated that. I needed to change that rule. "You're manipulating me," Marius growled, his canines sharp and glistening with saliva. I shuddered, imagining what they'd feel like on my neck. It worsened the ache between my legs. "Then are you manipulated?" I smirked, darkening the hunger in his eyes. That was an answer enough, making me laugh on his face. "I'll take you there, but on my terms," he growled, and that shut me up quickly. If you're captivated by Lyra's story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can get the latest content first.